competing with, really. Now, your brand's competitive landscape is as simple or as complicated as you choose it to be. Now, that's a very strange statement. But remember, you will only choose what your consumer tells you to choose. You're not going to make it up by yourself. You're not going to do what this particular food company that I was talking about earlier does. They just decide, you know what, this is our target. The rest of it we don't compete in, therefore they're not part of our category. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is how you are viewed by the consumer defines the category. Not the way you wish it were, or the way it should have been, or the way it could have been. How does the consumer view it? Now, for example, the line between cell phones as a category and music players as a category and cameras as a category is blurring. There is no line anymore. Now you can buy a camera that allows you to take pictures, but you can also buy a cell phone that allows you to take pictures and listen to music. And you can buy MP3 players that have camera. You know what I mean? The whole thing is getting very, very complicated from a consumer standpoint. But if you don't understand how the consumer is viewing the category you're in, you can't solve that consumer puzzle. It just doesn't function. And especially for your brand, I mean, your brands are enablers, right? Energizer per se is an enabler of the consumer's lifestyle and is being used in conjunction with many other brands and in many other contexts. So it makes it even more complicated. What are the usage occasions for batteries? How often do consumers buy batteries? When are they buying batteries? Now, obviously, the obvious ones you know is Christmas. How many batteries do you sell before, during that month of December as a percentage of your overall sales? What about Eid, the Ramadan promotions? How many batteries do you sell during that time? Those are the obvious things. I'm talking about understanding it at a much, much deeper level. Is anyone else warm or is it just me?
Okay.
Everyone's comfortable?
Okay.
All right.
Take out your jacket.
Now, you have to understand your direct and your indirect competition. Direct competition can be literally other battery manufacturers. What could be indirect competition?
Could be your own products.
Sorry?
Could be your own products, the ones that you make less money out of.
Yeah. Well, I would consider those to be almost your direct competition. Because at the end of the day, they directly replace what you are selling at the premium end. But for Schick, for example, what is your indirect competition?
Heat, waxing.
Veet. Hair removing products, for those of you who don't know. Spray it on, yeah. Depilatory creams.
Lithium ion or rechargeable battery devices which don't need our batteries, but they have a rechargeable built-in.
Right.
Mobile phone batteries.
iPod is a
Mobile phone, right. iPod, mobile
iPod is a
phones.
classical example.
Yeah, you just plug it into the wall socket and it recharges by itself in a couple of hours. So you've got to understand how the consumer views it. Again, not the way you view it, but the way the consumer views it. And then, here's the fun part. You get to define the category you want to play in. You get to define the category you want to play in. And you can define it the way you want. And I'll give you an example of that in a minute. So, thinking like a consumer. Now, this lady wants to buy a car. And we all know how people view used car salesmen. Or car salesmen overall. In fact, there are many studies that have been done in the US that have brought up consistently, over and over again, the least liked profession of any profession in the world, used car salesman, followed by insurance salesman, for some bizarre reason. I don't know what the insurance guys have done to deserve it, but they're really not popular at all. Now this guy is trying to sell her a car. How is he going to go about it? The first question he's likely to ask is, well, what kind of car are you looking for? Now, here's the thing. Abbas's needs when he buys a car will be different than Mike's needs, which will be different than Vijay's needs, which will be different than Paul's needs. But the category still remains the overall category, right? The absolute choices do not change much. What may be in the consideration set for a consumer might change. but the category is the category. Now here, these are the choices that this lady has. Now some of them she will automatically rule out. Others she might be interested in. She might not really want to buy a limousine, for example. Most of us wouldn't, some of us might. If you live in the GCC, this is probably a high option, or high up there in the ranks, buying an SUV. How many people in the room own an SUV? 2, 3, 4? That's it? Really? 5. Okay, 5 people. I have something in between. I have something that's almost an SUV, but not quite. Like I wouldn't really feel comfortable taking it onto the sand dunes, but it does more than a regular sedan. And that combination works for me because my wife chose it. And it's the path of least resistance for me. So I had another car. It fell in. Yeah, it's a crossover. I had another car. It fell into another category, and I sold it because it just was not worth the trouble.
What's that category called? A ditch.
Excuse me?
So what's the category called? A ditch.
A ditch.
Okay,
Well, unfortunately, it was one of those brands that I like a lot. I had a Mustang. Again, why? Because the Ford Mustang is probably the only Ford that I see myself owning. I've owned 2 of them in the past. Because again, the Mustang stands for something. It stands for freedom and independence and blah, blah, blah. So once I got over my hang-up on the brand, I was able to sell it without too much pain. So, let's say this is your brand.
What you're saying is basically the way you told you to sell it.
Yeah, pretty much. That was it.
Do you know what he values?
I don't normally acknowledge that sort of thing in an open forum, but yeah, that was it, Paul. Exactly. Now, when you're doing a competitive landscape of any sort, you will have competition that's very close into your brand, and you'll have competition that's further out, but still competition. What should be the vectors on the scale? You should let the consumer tell you that. We often find that a lot of companies want to use price as one of the vectors, price and quality, right? Price isn't really useful because we find that generally consumers equate a higher price with a better quality perception. In fact, this has been proven through a lot of studies. Someone mentioned perfume earlier. It is, I think it was a Harvard study that actually did this research. They put the same perfume in 2 different bottles. One was a very plain, sort of transparent bottle, and it costs. They put a price tag of I think $14.99 or something like that on that. They took the same perfume, put it in a really jazzed up, funky shape, gave it a nice name, and priced it at $95 or $100, something like that. And then of course they blind tested consumers, and 99.9 something % actually said the $100 perfume was far superior to the $14.99. And then when they were informed that it was actually the same perfume, they refused to believe it. It's impossible. It can't be the same. So when you price, you got to keep that in mind. If someone came to you and said, I have a brand new Mercedes 2010 model available for 50,000 dirhams, what would you think? It's a hot car, for sure. Or
He's lying.
no, 2010. There's something wrong.
So manufacturing defect.
Somebody has done something to this car. Like the engine fell out. Or they took it into the desert and now the engine is one solid block of sand. And it's going to cost you 200,000 dirhams to open the engine, clean it, and put it back together again. Something has happened to the car. Now, what does that do? That basically tells you that the brand has a certain intrinsic value, below which, if you drop, consumers actually start to question not the integrity of the brand, but the integrity of the person selling the brand. There has to be, because if it's a Mercedes, it can't be at this price. By default, right? It's the same thing with a Rolex. Someone comes up to you in a tube station and says, hey buddy, I got a Rolex for you for $20. You're like, yeah, right. It's not, it's not a Rolex. Now, he may actually have stolen it and be selling it to you, but even then he wouldn't sell it for $20. Because he could go to a pawn shop and get $1,000 for it. a $5,000 or $6,000 Rolex, you can still get $1,000 for it. So why would he give it to you for 20 bucks? So there is an intrinsic value associated with the brand. That's why we don't encourage people to use price as one of the vectors. You can use pretty much anything else. Again, quality. Quality is one of those things that kind of a toss-up word. Everyone claims quality. Everyone has quality. There's certain things that you must have in order to play in a category. If you say, I'm in the ice cream business and I have great taste as one of my parameters. Well, if you don't have great tasting ice cream, you're not really in the ice cream business, are you? You're in the frozen slush business or frozen mud business, but you're not really in the ice cream business. So that's just to give you an example of things we call antes, costs of being in a particular category. So those are not generally considered parameters to judge. But let's say we take engineering excellence on the one axis, and we take fashionability or glamour or whatever you want to call it on the other axis. And at first glance, this looks like a dog's breakfast, right? It's all over I mean, my God, how the hell do you choose from these cars? Well, if you start actually clustering them, it becomes a lot less complicated. And by the way, this is how consumers view the category, not how you view the category, right? So when they talk about luxury cars, these are the brands they're putting into the luxury segment. Off-roaders, mainstreams, compacts, sports cars. It becomes a lot simpler to decide where you want to play. Now, if you are, let's say, a new car manufacturer, which of these seems to give you the most options to get into? I mean, aside from making a really unfashionable and crappy car, which, I'm sure that it'll be kind of hard to play in this segment. But aside from that, let's be fair. This is a very crowded segment, right? And it's very expensive to be in this segment. How about here? Now, in the Middle East, this segment is very crowded. There are probably 20 or 30 brands and sub-brands of SUVs that are in this segment right here. How about here? Very crowded. So where does a new car manufacturer come in? This is very helpful in trying to define what you're doing when you're trying to get into a new competitive category that you are currently not in.
It also partially answers why so many of them go bust. Because they're not differentiated.
They're not differentiated, exactly. Now, the funny thing again is, if you do this map for the US, this is what it looks like. If you were to do this for the Middle East, you would have a lot of off-roaders in the luxury segment. Like the big the LX 570s from Lexus, or the big Mercedes, or whatever. You'd have a lot of off-roaders. There would be a very large overlap into the luxury segment. Right? The Cadillac Escalades of the world. Now, you do the same thing in a market like Iran, which is very underdeveloped. The entire grid moves that way. Now, they don't really have most of these luxury cars. They're simply not available. There, a Hyundai, a new Hyundai, is considered a luxury car. Now, if you try to apply this roadmap or this competitive landscape blindly to all markets, what do you think will be the result? So your insights need to be based on a competitive context that makes sense in that context. What applies in Saudi Arabia does not necessarily apply in Iran. In fact, most probably does not apply in Iran. It may apply to an extent in Kuwait, in Qatar, to an extent even in the UAE, although the UAE tends to differ on quite a few areas. So it is important to understand this.